My name is Andrea A. Smith. I call it Andrea A because there's so many Andrea A. Smiths in the world.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for joining me on first name basis. It's wonderful to have you.
I'm a stress resilience coach. I call myself a stress buster, a stress coach, because after years of experiencing working as a registered nurse and seeing people come into the hospital, taking too many antidepressants, I just felt that I could really help them and get them back on track so they're more in control of their lives.
Now, you've also written a book, I see, Fear Less, Live More, which I think is a beautiful title. Can you just mention a bit about that, please?
So the reason, it's the same reason I wrote the book, because I went out there and tried to look for things that I could help people with. I could help, or look up things that I could use for my own stress. And I didn't find a concise book with tips and techniques and easy to read so you can dip in and out of it. And so I thought I'd go out and write a book myself. And the book, you can pick it up. You can pick up just one chapter. It's filled with, first of all, my story, a little bit about my story. I will then ask you questions. I give you a little bit of theory behind what I'm talking about in the chapter, but then it's filled with techniques and a space where you can write your own ideas, your thoughts of what's going on for you. There's also a case study to illustrate how it works with people. And then I end the chapter with Andrea's learning alerts, just to remind you of what you need to do if you're struggling with that same issue.
So it really sounds like a workbook.
It is a workbook and a book that people can really use, especially with the COVID-19 challenges that we're all facing all over the world.
Thank you. Now, you're a stress resilience coach.
Yes.
What's your definition or idea about what stress actually is?
So my idea definition is this tightening feeling that you feel in your body when you feel an emotional or physical tension. It can come from an event, it can come from a situation, it can come from a challenging time. But the point is that because you're stressed, it makes you feel angry, frustrated, nervous, anxious. It is your body's reaction to this challenge or demand. That's what I call stress.
Now, do you think stress is sometimes necessary? Do you think it's always too much, too little? How do you think about the volume of stress that people, or quantity of stress that people
So stress a little amount of stress can be all right, but it's important because it makes you positive. It makes you motivated to get out of bed and then go to work, and you feel stressed because you may not make the train on time. But when a person is experiencing a distressing event, they feel threatened, anxious, and frightened as a result of it. And what happens is they don't know how to respond to it. They are in denial. It can affect them. So especially, I've looked up a lot of research, and 80% of all physical and mental illnesses are linked to stress. It can affect your immune system. And especially in the challenging times we're having with COVID-19, if you have extra stress in your body, your immune system is not functioning effectively well. You may be reacting to that event in a hyperactive manner. You may be, very grumpy and argumentative at home with your family. You'll have some relationship issues. The children you're not reacting properly. So I have a strain analogy. Yes, events in challenging time does happen. But if we let these adversities in life break us down physically and mentally or emotionally, we're not going to become strong with these life experiences. We're just going to get weaker. So we need to start to build a resilience towards stress.
Right. Now, that's a lot of really helpful information, Andrew. Thank you so much. I too have kind of dived into the issue of stress, largely because I study burnout and talk about burnout. And Holmes and Rahi were two psychiatrists who came out in the 60s and studied, I think, 5,000 charts of what was happening in the 3 months prior to people getting admitted for heart attacks or strokes or physical illnesses. And they found and published that a lot of events that had happened to people that might have been coincident with their physical problem or psychological and social problems.
Yes.
Even things like getting married and getting a divorce, buying a house, getting a job promotion. And their stress scale, the Holmes and Rahe stress scale, is still used by actuaries to determine physical illness in people when they buy insurance.
Yes.
The other thing I use is the bone analogy.
Wow.
And you live in the UK where we don't get much sunlight. And
No.
so our bones need some stress to be strong.
Yes.
Not enough stress, and we get something called osteoporosis. Too much stress, and we break them.
Yes.
So there's something about the right amount of stress that keeps us strong and vital and keeps our immune system strong, and something about too little. But most importantly, what we're talking about today is too much. Now, what makes stress traumatic?
So, do you know when you have too much stress in your body, you will then not react to that, like you said, the little amount of stress properly in your life. It will just grow and grow. What we call our fight or flight. So you're in that fight or flight for a long period of time. And when you're in that fight or flight for a long period of time and you're not relaxed or had some me time, that can really affect you physically. Long term, you may, have a cold that's lasted a long, long time, or your immune response is not effective. So you may then get another illness. And I don't want to frighten people by talking about serious cancers, but long-term stress can cause quite detrimental physical illnesses.
So we have two kinds of stresses that I think you're talking about. We have what I call rain, drizzle, and fog, which you know a lot about. Which is micro trauma, constant micro trauma. And this happens often in the workplace when people get burnt out. And we have the more obvious stress, which is one singular or repeated singular huge events that might lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, for example.
Yes. So I have a client and a colleague, and his post-traumatic disorder, that he was working in the police for a long period of time. And it just got so bad that he couldn't even function effectively. He was faced with such deep challenges that he then physically started overeating and just became 20 stone. That affected his physical ability to not only work, but also his mental ability to face challenging situations. So he was then retired from the police force, and he really had to take time out. He struggled very badly with post-traumatic disorder, and he had to take time out and work on his mental and emotional challenges that he was facing. And now he's in a much better place. He's actually, started working with a business called Dragon Wellbeing, and he's doing exceptionally well. But long-term stress for about 15 years just caused him to just let himself go and not be, healthy with his mind and body. And he had really struggled with long-term challenges. In fact, recently he had just had an operation because of it as well. So really working and not letting stress impact your physical health and your mental health is hugely important.
So Andrea, just borrowing on what you just said to extrapolate it a little tiny bit. Yeah. My definition of what makes stress traumatic is if the stress begins to define you.
Absolutely.
And when we're born and we're growing up and we develop our personality, we have a shape to our personality. If we have a mild trauma, our personality shape doesn't change that much. It might jiggle a little bit, but it'll come back. But if we have a major trauma, or if we have continuous micro trauma, the shape can change so that we have a new definition of feeling like a victim. Yeah. And we might be victimized in the workplace, we might be victimized by experiences or traumas that happen to us. Once that trauma defines us, then we live inside that bubble instead of the one we used to when we were getting healthier. And as therapists, I think we have to help people redefine themselves from their stress trauma to come back to a more normal, hopefully balanced way. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. So I'm going to give an analogy about that's what I called moving from that bubble. I call it resilience. So I'm just going to give you a metaphor, an example. So picture a tree, and the tree has been hit by storm, wind, rain over years. But on one side, there is a thin, flexible reed that's coming up, and it's just growing from the other side. Now, if life throws challenges, many challenges to us, and as we know, we will be faced with many more challenges after COVID-19 and the virus that's affected us. It's your capacity to come back to that center, your capacity to understand that you have to be flexible and learn to pivot and make a different way to cope with those challenges. I call it the essence. The resilience is the essence of who I am, how I bend backwards towards the center, how I do not crack, but I let life carry on, how I'm physically and emotionally flexible. So I'm able to focus better. I'm able to change my point of view and become more flexible towards the center, the essence of who I am really, and not let the storm or those challenges kind of break me.
Wow. You said flexibility. Now, I came up with an acronym called FEMPOSH. F of FEMPOSH is flexibility, which coincides exactly with what you're saying. I think that's such an important idea. I'd like to start to talk about resilience, the way that you see it. And so when you're meeting someone and you might detect that they have a lack of resilience, how do you approach that?
Well, what I ask that person is to, I just remind that person of a good time in their life. And when they bring up that good time, I ask them to focus on that and just try and bring that positivity into their life, just to make them realize that they can have that positivity. What are they going to do? So we then work towards that positivity, how they're going to be positive, how they're going to work towards it. So I'm just going to give an example, actually, Ashok. Do you know, when a person is struggling with that lack of resilience, or with that, I call it their black spider widow. So they then are in that their negative mind chatter. They're just sucked into that, and they don't know how to stop those negative thoughts. So I have a little, I call it reframing, the art of reframing, use that as a life skill. Right. So the first, I ask them to pause, think of that negative mind chatter that you're thinking of. Just pause, look at it, see if it's valid, ask yourself some pertinent questions. Why am I feeling that? What would I like to feel? Recognize those triggers. Then I ask them to pivot. And when they pivot, when they change the way they are, choosing a different way. It could be that they're doing a technique called mindfulness, or they're meditating every day. You said you just went to the gym and exercised, choosing something, even going for a walk in nature for about 20 minutes around the block, doing something different. And then the last is, I call it my 3 Ps. It's called practice purpose. Finding something that you can focus on, finding something that will feel like a positive spin in your life, getting some support from a therapist like you and me, or choosing a friend to talk to and relay all of this, and finding that thing that's positive for you. That could really help with my 3 Ps, of course. The 3 Ps are: you pause, you take a breath and notice what's occurring. Mm-hmm. Secondly is pivoting, just befriending your black widow, but not letting it impact your life. And, just not ignoring it, but working through it and saying, okay, that's what my negative thoughts are, but what am I going to do? And then the last one is called practice purpose, remembering your unique essence. Now, my unique essence is that I'm honest, I'm truthful, I come from a really good culture, and I am just going to motivate people with those values, those things. So how each person has that practice purpose. How are you going to shine right now that light into that dark situation? That's what I call my 3 Ps.
That's amazing. So it sounds like we have a very similar idea about this, because from my perspective, people have to be patient. They're not going to get over a trauma
No.
and discover resilience right away. They have to modulate how they feel.
Yeah.
So if they're too angry, or if they're rageful or too anxious, we have to bring them back to a centered sense of emotion so they can begin to use their cognitive skills rather than their emotional skills without their cognitive skills. And I love the way you get them to practice. So that's actually engaging their conscious mind so they can practice that. Optimism is something that sometimes doesn't get talked about enough. But we people might say, oh, what's the point of being optimistic? Or, I'm a realist. And I'm saying, that's fine. But we actually have to have optimism to have hope. And because we're both healers, and as you said in your green stick analogy, if it bends, it can heal. Yeah. People heal too. People heal remarkably, actually. Yes, so we have to practice that hope, which I simply think is optimism. Now, do you think that resilience changes the way we relate to stress after we learn to become resilient?
Yes, because do you know right now, a lot in the news is about your physical diet. But imagine you working on that emotional diet. Imagine that if you help people with that emotional diet and reframing, it's like asking yourself these questions. The Heart Institute in the UK has measured when that person is stressed, and you can see it in about 3 meters away, actually, Ashok, from that person, of how stressed they are. Even on Zoom, you can notice they're stressed from the eyes, the tension in their shoulders. You can make that out. So if you work on that emotional diet, if you reframe and choose to be compassionate and forgive yourself for 5 minutes, you'll feel better. You'll be able to boost your immune system for about 6 hours a day. So the resilience can lessen that stress, can teach us how to cope. So I will say that resilience will give you more sense of control, because it'll help you feel more positive about yourself. And that's the way I work with my clients on.
Perfect. So what I hear you saying, and I think this is a really intriguing concept, is that we all have an aura, which is a layer of electricity around us, and we're emitting electricity all the time. Our brains make a lot of electricity, so do our hearts. And if you put an EKG machine on your heart, you can see there's quite a lot of electricity. Our muscles make a lot of electricity too. So imagine if you could measure people's stress aura. And yes. I actually had a client years and years ago, and every time this person came into my office, my computer crashed every single time. Wow. And then when we parted ways, my computer was working fine. Now, I'm not blaming anybody. Maybe it was just absolute coincidence, but part of me always wondered, was there something about the stress of this person's aura that my computer was reacting to? Yes. And that person got better, and when we moved on. But I was wondering if we could measure that aura, then we could have some feedback to people. Because there's an interesting exercise. If you check your heart rate, and then you do some meditation, do some deep breathing, you can actually decrease your heart rate. That's called biofeedback. Yes. Imagine if we can decrease people's stress rate by the same kind of biofeedback. And that's what we are. We're stress aura therapists. We're trying to get people to manage that stress so that their energy, when they're emanating that around other people, whether it's in the workplace or in their relationships or with their kids and friends, that people feel more comfortable when they're around them, when they're in control of that. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. Do you know, when people are stressed, you can see that tension in their body. They get very anxious, get very bristly. Right. And then what's going on in their heart, they will attack you, or they will be very negative about themselves or negative about what's going on. And then you know that something going on in their life. Like you say, you can see it. And you'll think, well, this is not me. I haven't even said anything. Why is that person reacting to me in such a manner? So like you say, it's that aura. Something's going on in their life that's really distressing them. Right. And that's why they're reacting. The stress, they let that stress into their everyday life and let them challenge them even more than they should.
And to circle back, if that aura is going out, it's also going into their organs. Yes. And hurting their organs. and their body systems and their immune system. So there's so much value in helping people manage their stress, begin to work on it, and develop resilience. Now, can we teach resilience, do you think?
Definitely. We can teach people how to stay calm through either deep breathing techniques. We can teach them, like I said to you, recognize, I call it the black spider widow, but recognize that. Recognize what are those negative thought processes that's going on in their mind. You know, I don't feel good about myself today. So you ask them, what is going on for you? Or what would you like to happen? Oh, my life is full of problems. So tell me the problem. Are you thinking correctly? Are you really talking about the problem, or you're talking about those negative thoughts that you're doubting yourself? You're not feeling confident about yourself. So you can definitely teach resilience, because you can teach them how to create that balance between that stress and resilience. So they will be able to be, have a little bit of stress, so motivate them to complete the task that they need to do, but have enough of calm that they are just reacting the right amount of manner.
And I always think, as a therapist, and I'm sure you may agree with that, but if you don't, that's fine. But if we teach one person resilience, we're really teaching everyone in their life resilience as a role model.
Yes.
Because ultimately we learn by what we say to each other, but we also learn by modeling.
Yes.
So if we help a stressed out person become less stressed, that will model that to the people around them in the workplace, in their relationships and friends, and towards their children.
Absolutely. Also, the calmer I feel, and I've got 2 children, the calmer they are in the household. Or if my daughter's a bit prickly and grumpy because she's still in her teens, then I notice that the reaction spreads in that household. So, you spread that anxiousness wherever you are. So if you're calm, you're gentle. So whenever my daughter is, I call it actually her emotional virus. So when she's anxious, she's angry, she's a bit grumpy, I say to her, take a breath, calm down. What would you like to say to me in this calm manner? And then she will go, ooh. And then after 5 minutes, we take a couple of breaths, she calms down. And I say, oh, that's what you wanted to say to me. So then she's much calmer. And then we have this nice conversation. And then she's able to react to me. And I'll be able to give her some tips of what she's worried about. And then she goes off and does her thing. And then she's able to not, keep that balance, not react in a manner that stress of the studying or the university or whatever's going on in her life impact into our conversation, because there's nothing I've done that she's reacting to. It's what's going on in her life that she is.
Right. And I want to point out something here, that bugs by themselves aren't necessarily bad. Our body is full of bacteria that are very useful and essential to our survival. So my theory has always been, if you're going to get infected by something, be infected by good stuff like passion and hope and optimism and energy and drive and love.
Also forgiving yourself. I've recently learned that forgiving yourself for not being perfect. You always teach empathy. So just being kindest to yourself, being gentle with yourself and going, okay, I might have been, grumpier with my daughter yesterday. Today I'll be kind to myself, and then I'll calm down and I'm able to then be nicer to her and to myself. And then we're all just happier in that process.
I think empathy makes people more resilient.
Yes.
It strengthens us when we have a sense of other people around us emotionally. We can be supportive to them, but we can also get their support too. Empathy strengthens relationships, and that strengthens resilience.
So I love what we're talking about, because we're on the same level, and we're not managing this emotional diet, as I call it. We could just reframe it and changing the way people are looking at it, so they can change their mindset, their ability to reframe every time that tree of theirs is bent, and they are just pivoting back. They're flexible enough.